Hello, hello, and welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and I apologize for the delayed start today. We are having some technical issues related to sound, but I managed to do a quick fix, so hopefully everything will be working. Today, I wish to embark on what we might call a deep dive on the concept of intention, and specifically why it is that we have that idiom that the road to hell is paved with so-called good intentions. And I want to begin just by, if I can get everything going here. Oh, it would help if we shared our screen. And it's this one. Okay. So I want to begin at looking at this word, the word itself. It may not be immediately obvious, but the word intention, specifically the word intent, but intention is made up of two components. This prefix in means, let me just get the specific, don't want to misquote you on this. Okay, so we think of in as within, something inside, something else. But in Latin, it's toward, right? Or on, or actually on. If that's, well, actually, it's not even on, is it? It's upon. And the second part is the Latin tendere, which in Latin means, right, to stretch or to strain. So to stretch toward or to strain toward, to reach out for something. It is no accident that this root word, tendare, we have within it this portion, which ends up being the root word of words like everything from attend to a word that is almost synonymous. It sounds, I should say, onomatopoeic, and that is tension itself. But it's also, in words like, for example, to pay attention. to attend to reach out for, to strive for. But we also have words like extend and even pretend. And if you notice, when it comes to, right, there is a relationship between tension and tendare, but tense, T-E-N-S, this actually relates. Just going to make some room here. Okay, yeah, thanks for letting me know. Okay. Tense, which, of course, is also related to time. Past tense, present tense, tense as a moment, as so, or a forward looking or backward looking. So I wanted to sort of map this out in a kind of to flesh out a little bit, to try to give us a background as to the roots of this word intention. And obviously, what matters from our perspective is the notion here, or the practical reality, that when we're talking about tension, we're really talking about stress, right? Strain, tension, but also, to reach, but also to pretend. These are all related, or extend ourselves, overextend ourselves. These are all born of the same fundamental concept and linguistic metaphysical code that is encoded into the word itself. That we intend to do something, or we intend to accomplish something. We have this intention. Even if it is a good intention, put those in air quotes, right? Even if it's a good intention, it's a stretch. There's a strain involved. We are reaching for something. Why is this inherently a problem? Well, we can begin by asking whose intention is it? Who is reaching? Who is straining? Well, clearly, it's us. We are the ones who have intentions. We want to accomplish this, or we want to accomplish that, or we want to achieve XYZ outcome. So we act, in other words, we plan, we organize, we plan, and we act in accordance with intentions, because we are all brought up to live life in an orderly fashion, in an intentional way. And the reason why that is because of the antonyms of acting without intention. Let me see if I can get some of these out. Okay, so the opposite of acting with intention, of course, we have unintention. Unintentional acts. We have aimlessness. Aimlessness. Or purposelessness, or how about, pointless, right? Pointless actions. We have accidents. And we have impulse. Now, this last one, this is key. Because we are brought up and taught and instructed to be intentional. Precisely because very often as children, we were acting on impulse. And teachers and parents, authority figures, they guided us, they advised us, they instructed us on the dangers of impulsiveness. That no, you have to think things through. You have to be intentional about how you go through life. You have to think things through. You have to plan. You have to study. You have to weigh all of your options so that you make considered decisions and you take actions based on weighing the pros and cons. And impulse, much of modern day, many problems that people suffer from, whether it's addictions or all manner of behavior, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they lack impulse control. But again, it comes down to the question, whose impulse? Or rather, the impulse of what? From where is the origin of that impulse? Nobody asks that question. Nobody mentions that growing up. We only get reprimanded when our actions, which appear to be impulsive, that we didn't think through, have effects which the authority figures, the people around us, don't like. They don't like the effects of our actions. So they judge the origin of our actions and say, why did you, don't be so impulsive. Don't act on your impulse, because your impulses lead to bad outcomes. And you don't want bad outcomes, you want good outcomes. And to get good outcomes, that means you can't act impulsively, you must be intentional. Mutaga has a question here, or his comment here. He says, though I speak mostly French, English is easy for me to understand because roughly 50% of English words are actually French, even if French is a Latin language and English is a Germanic language. Yes, that's true. Many of our words have Latin and Greek origins, including Germanic and French and all kinds of other origins, because English is a hodgepodge. It's a mutt, right? It's not a pure language by any means. It's amalgamated a great deal from many other languages. So this notion of we must be intentional to gain good outcomes, desired outcomes, means we want to set good intentions. Of course, because we're trying to achieve good outcomes, desired outcomes, beneficial outcomes. We want the effects in the world that we have on the world, we want them to be positive, right? That's a good thing, isn't it? How can that be a bad thing? And yet, we have this expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But we just spent nearly 20 minutes on the etymology of intention and walking through how the opposite of intention is impulse. And we all have our experience being brought up and in a so-called responsible adult world where everything is planned and everything is organized. And everybody is stressed. Everybody is in tension. Tension. Everybody is straining. They're stressed out. They're straining. They're stretching. They're reaching. They're hyperextended, or they're pretending, or they're paying attention to all the wrong things. And rest assured that the vast majority of people have good intentions. They have good intentions. And their good intentions are causing them to extend, to pretend, to pay attention to the wrong things, to outcomes, to desired outcomes, or expected outcomes, or appropriate outcomes, acceptable outcomes. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to pay their bills, meet their mortgage, and all the other requirements, pressures that are bearing down on people in this day and age. People are straining themselves. They're extending themselves. They're reaching. to try to fulfill those obligations. And they are making that effort with good intentions. They want to fulfill their obligations, or they want to produce positive outcomes. But this is stress. This is strain. And Mutaga points out that even most of our so-called elite think they have very good intentions for humanity. And this is true. They really do think they're doing what's best. But again, there's the key. They think, they believe, they want, they desire certain outcomes. They intend to achieve certain outcomes. And they're not impulsive about it. They're not impulsive about it. They're not aimless. They're not purposelessness. It's not pointless actions that they're taking. I recently watched a video about the working conditions at Hyundai in the United States, where they have several plants and they have multiple subcontractors, all providing parts and components and systems for the cars that they manufacture in the United States. They have an entire ecosystem of suppliers and partners. Now, I'm old enough to remember when Hyundai came to North America for the first time from South Korea, and their first car that they imported to Canada, at least, was called the Hyundai Pony. And it was the quintessential example of basic transportation. You could not imagine, unless you were from Eastern Europe, where they had cars like the Lada and the Warburg and Skoda and Yugo. Those were the comparable cars in Europe to compare with the Hyundai Pony. And just to put that in perspective, this was, let me see if I can open image in new tab. Okay, let me see if I can show this to you here. This is what the Hyundai Pony was. It was the most basic transportation. I think it had a 3-speed automatic or a 4-speed manual. It was a horrendous car. It worked, got you from A to B, but it was absolute bare bones. But you know what it was? It was cheap. And I mean, it was the most inexpensive car you could buy new in Canada in 1984. I believe you could buy it for well under $10,000. I can't remember exactly how much. I suppose you know what? I could ask let's see, how much was Hyundai Pony in 1984 in USA? Let's see if we can get an answer here. Okay, so in 1984, a new Hyundai, you could buy it for $6,000 Canadian. Less than six. The most expensive Hyundai Pony was $5,994 Canadian in 1984. So well under $10,000. Now, why am I mentioning this? Okay, because at that time, many Canadians bought the Hyundai Pony. Why? Because there was no other car you could get for that cheap. Not a new car. It was basic transportation, but it was inexpensive. It was almost as if Hyundai had the intention of bringing a bare bones, no nonsense automobile and make it available to the masses at a very favorable, very affordable price. And that's what they did. And many Canadians responded to that. The Pony ended up being the first car for many teenagers, or became an affordable second car. You know, it was a hatchback, it was 4 doors, it was practical. Again, it wasn't fancy, and it wasn't it wasn't going to win you any races or anything else, but it was good on gas, and it was an affordable, sensible transportation. And Hyundai followed that trend. They set that intention. And you might think to yourself, well, that's a noble intention. That's the same intention that Henry Ford had when he developed his assembly line, to dramatically reduce costs and also to increase production, because he wanted to make this invention, his Ford Model T. He wanted to democratize the automobile. He wanted an automobile in every household. And the only way he could do that was to automate production. So he had this intention. And in his mind, it was a noble intention. It was a good intention. And Hyundai had this good intention. And many people appreciated that. And many people were able to buy a brand new car, which up until that point, many people could only ever afford to buy used. And, the used cars from the 70s and 80s, like, they were rust buckets. It's not like today where you can buy a used car that's 16 years old or whatever and still be in relatively good shape with like hundreds of thousands of kilometers on the odometer. Right? Cars just simply did not last back then. Right? There was no rust proofing. Everything was steel and iron. There was very little aluminum being used. So in other words, people who relied on used cars very often, yeah, they got cars for cheap, but then those cars were on the verge of falling apart. So these people at last could buy a brand new car. And for decades, right? Because that's 1984. Flash forward to 2026. That's 40 years later. 40 years, Hyundai has been in Canada and North America. Because soon after, they used Canada as a beachhead. And they established themselves in North America first in Canada, and then they moved down into the US. I think they may have also gone to Mexico, but I can't speak to Mexico and South America because I didn't live there at that time. I was just a kid. Fast forward to today, and many Hyundai products in their Genesis line, their luxury line, is at times, in certain models, in certain cases, it's still the value buy. The brand still prides itself on offering a lot for your money, more than its competitors. And that's true for its sister brand, Kia. So they have this intention of being the brand and making automobiles that are more affordable than their competitors, but every bit as feature packed and as reliable and as performance oriented, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or at least on the surface level. They are trying to, they are still the value proposition, in other words. Now, the gap in that value proposition has narrowed somewhat because they don't make, complete junk buckets anymore, right? They have to, they have to adhere to regulations, and most people today, when they buy a new car, there are certain minimum features that they expect it to have, and minimum performance, and minimum amenities and luxury, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, the market has forced Hyundai and Kia to move up market. They still try to undercut the competition on price, but that gap has been narrowing. But their intention is still to make the best cars that they can for as little as possible to undercut the competition. They're really a volume brand. They want to sell more cars at a slightly discounted price, in other words. So we can step back and look from a big picture perspective and say, well, that's not a bad intention, is it? I mean, if you're in the market for a new car or used car, because Hyundais and Kias, they don't hold their value so well in the secondary market. So you can get used Hyundais and Kias for less money than their alternatives, because the reliability is it's a little sketchy. That's why they offer 10-year warranties on their powertrains and this kind of stuff, because even after all this time, after 40 years, the reliability, it's still a little sketchy, right? They're not Toyotas, right? But of course, if you're buying a Hyundai or a Kia, you say, well, I know I'm not getting a Toyota, because a comparable Toyota is several $1,000s more expensive, right? This is the thing about a value brand. A value brand is offering you value for money, but you can't expect the same reliability and the same, you can't expect it to compete on every metric as the industry leader and still offer it at a deep discount. You can't expect that. And so Hyundai and Kia know that, and Hyundai and Kia buyers should know that. And they do know that. They find that out the hard way if they're cross-shopping a Hyundai product with a competitor, and they discover that, yeah, a comparable equipped Toyota is many, many thousands of dollars more expensive. So then I encounter this story, this independent investigative journalist looking into Kia's employment practices in the United States. And they specifically the plant that they, I believe it's in Georgia. Without going into all the details, it's all of Kia's plants and their subsidiaries. They're all non-unionized. And the list of complaints, the list of cases of, just come out and call a spade of exploitative business practices by the company towards its employees, towards its workers, not just in the Hyundai plant itself, but in the satellite companies, their suppliers, many of which are owned by the parent company, or they're exclusive suppliers to Hyundai, but they're not under the umbrella in the same way. But again, they're the complaints. There's a long list of complaints of people suffering from injuries, all kinds of medical related injuries, including everything from carpal tunnel and repetitive strain injuries to accidental injuries. And just, I don't want to, I don't want to reiterate the entire investigative journalist story. Suffice it to say, the summation was that from the workers, that the company treats them like robots. The company treats them, the company seems to have no care whatsoever, or no understanding whatsoever, that they're human beings, that they're not, that they're fragile, they are not, they cannot be worked to death, as it were, and with very long shifts and very short breaks. And there were cases where employees suffering work-related injuries would only be paid compensation, or paid like sick leave and or disability from Kia or Hyundai, if they went to Hyundai's own physicians, Hyundai's own sanctioned physicians. If you went to your own physician, got a second opinion, and that you went and got MRIs done, or CAT scans or whatever, and your injuries were proven to be far more severe, far more serious, Hyundai would not take that second opinion into account. Only their board certified physicians, only what their physicians said was used to determine compensation or disability, as an example. In other words, in a world, in the world of mechanicity, in the world of physical reality and materialism, you can have the best of intentions, and you can make this very noble sounding intention, and saying, I want to provide inexpensive but good transportation to people, and I want to be able to provide it for the lowest price possible. I want to be the value brand, in other words. And if we give them the benefit of the doubt and say that was a really well-intentioned, good intention from the get-go, after 40 years, 4 decades of having that intention indoctrinated into the policy of the corporation, you now have a mechanical entity that has taken that intention as gospel, as the guiding principle of the organization. And as the guiding principle of the organization, the mechanical entity called the corporation only knows how to fulfill that mandate one way, and that is by enacting the law of conservation of energy. That means maximizing value creation while minimizing expenditures. If the guiding principle of an entity is to be able to produce a product cheaper and sell it cheaper than anybody else, then it has to try to squeeze the most value out of its supply chain and out of its employees and pay the least amount of money to its suppliers and to its employees. And if it keeps, and its intention it puts that tension. Okay, how often have you heard in business or in economics or even in households where people talk about stretching budgets? And how many times have you overextended yourself in terms of your budget, in terms of how much money you've spent this month or this week? Or if you have owed someone money, have you ever asked for an extension? Because we're overextended, because we're all stretching and reaching, and we're all, especially now with the inflation and the war in Iran and the gas prices, we're all telling ourselves we have to stretch every dollar. We have to try to squeeze every last drop of value out of the money that we have. Why? Well, we have good intentions. We want to feed our family and pay our bills, and right? But this is all we strain, we struggle, we spend time, we go around, we shop around and buy our groceries and the things that we need from those stores where it's on sale, or where we collect points, or we're always looking. If that's the mindset that we're in, and that's the mindset that we have because of the responsibilities, the pressures that we are under, right? We have to survive, we have to pay our bills, we have these obligations, we have to feed our children, we have to pay the mortgage, we have to go to work. So we have to, if we commute to work, we have to buy gas, and gas is now at, however expensive it is. So something's got to give. And in the same way that when, we have that expression, when money's tight, when does money become tight? When it's being stretched. When you're stretching every dollar, you're trying to extend what you can get and how long you can go before your next paycheck. This is what people call living paycheck to paycheck. This is what we're talking about. This is living in tension. And Hyundai, with its intention to make inexpensive cars for people, so perhaps they do have more money to spend on other things. The problem is that something's got to give somewhere. Something is going to be stretched. That intention has what they call unintended consequences. But really, the unintended consequences are just the fact that you're trying to do more for less, and that creates a tension. That imbalance creates a tension that has to be made up for somewhere in a mechanical system. In a system that's constantly seeking to balance itself, the shortfall must be made up somewhere, which means somebody somewhere is going to be stretching to make up that difference. And in the case of Hyundai, the people who are stretching are the employees, the workers in the Hyundai plant itself, but also working in all of the subsidiaries and all of the supplier companies that are being squeezed. Hyundai is always squeezing them for improving the quality, but lowering the price, because that's their intention, right? Hyundai's intention to build the best cars that they can for the least amount of money. And there are literally thousands of people living in tension because of this. So that millions of people can save $1,000 here or a couple $1,000 there when they buy their SUV or when they buy their, whatever automobile. Those savings, that discount brand, and if the company is behaving like that in one plant, in one part of the United States, then rest assured it is nickeling and diming and squeezing and stretching and pressuring all over the world, wherever it operates, whenever it can and however it can. This stress, this strain, this tension is a direct result of the so-called good intention of being able to make these quality products, so-called, for less money. These automobiles. Because it is a state of denial that capitalism exists in. I actually wrote in my first book an entire chapter on this. I called it Seconomics, social environmental economics, and it was a way of fixing the fundamental flaw of capitalism, which is unaccounted for intangible costs of business. What is referred to in business vernacular as externalized costs, the externalized costs of doing business. And my argument, although I did not explicitly say so in my first book, because that book was secular in nature. It was a business and economics and politics book about making the world a better place, fixing some of these fundamental problems in the world on a institutional level, on a foundational, operational level. And the point of my thesis was very simple, and it is beautifully illustrated by the Hyundai example that we just gave. But the thesis was very straightforward. In business, let's just let's just pick the right colors here. let's go with green, okay? So you have this something called revenue. Oops. Revenue. And let's just call it costs because it's easier to write, right? So this is the money that comes in. This is the money that comes in. And this is the money that goes out, right? So in very simple terms, if you do, okay, so revenue minus costs equals earnings, but let's use the word profit. Okay, this is what's left over. So this is like the price that you sell it for, the price that you sell it for, and these are the costs, the inputs. Your profit is, of course, your profit, what's left over. This is what they call earnings. This is what you earn. Now, the thing is that in accounting, in business, these are all tangible. In other words, in accounting, it's only things that can be, you can put a number to it, a dollar value that's accounted for. But there's another concept in accounting known as the balance sheet. It's another, so this would be the earnings statement or the income statement. That's another word for earnings, by the way. That's, you know, we could say let's use that word because we all like, that's one that more of us can relate to. Okay, income. The other instrument in accounting refers to accounting for assets. And I won't get into the details, technical details here, but it's assets equals liability plus shareholder equity. So the value of a company, its assets must equal the shares issued to shareholders and the debt held by the company. Okay, so that's known as, that's debt that's carried on the balance sheet, but that debt is dollar value debt. That's money owed. And those assets are assets that can be counted in dollars. Again, and the shares can be, the company can be evaluated and each share will have a value associated with it. That's what the stock market is. But because in accounting, the rules is that the balance sheet must balance. If you have debt that you don't record on the balance sheet, then you have what we call off-balance sheet debt. And then that's called fraud. And there have been many, many, many cases of companies hiding their debt. Right now, it's the AI companies. The AI companies are doing just that. The AI companies have trillions of dollars in debt, and they're hiding that debt in very, very creative accounting ways. But when you do that, you undermine trust in the markets and trust in the industry, and you are making the company appear more valuable than it is. In other words, more valuable from an economic standpoint. But like we just showed in the Hyundai case study, if you have profit, this is tangible. All this is tangible. If you have tangible costs and tangible profit, there is this thing called the real world. There must be intangible costs. And that these intangible costs are, in fact, what account for the fact that you can have any profit at all. So in the case of Hyundai, okay, it's exploitation of workers. It's the only way to explain how profit can exist. The balance sheet must balance. It must be able to offset. There are real world consequences to making economic decisions with the best of intentions. There are real world consequences that are not accounted for because they're not tangible. How do you put a dollar value on exploitation of workers? How do you account for the cost of someone who is struggling from whatever debilitating medical condition they developed on the job because they were forced to work 14-hour days with not enough breaks and not enough lunch hour, and so they ended up with repetitive strain injuries and carpal tunnel and all kinds of other debilitating illnesses because the human body is not meant to work in a repetitive way for that stretch of time without the requisite breaks in order to be able to reset. And right, it's just we know this is scientific fact. But how do you put a price on it? And if you can't put a price on it, if you can't account for it under the umbrella of economics and accounting and business, well, guess what? It doesn't get accounted for. And it's accumulating massive amounts of off-balance sheet debt. The unintended consequences or unaccounted for consequences, the consequences that are swept under the rug, out of sight, out of mind. We could say, for the sake of consistency, that they are unattended consequences. They are consequences that are not being given proper attention. And capitalism pretends that it's only has positive impact in the world. And it is able to pretend that because it has this incredible stage, this theatrics that it does called the stock market and GDP growth and all of these other machinations that it has people paying attention to. Ooh, number go up. Ooh, number go up. Everything good. Number go up. And although you don't have to be a fan of unions by any stretch of the imagination, but employees organizing to try to get more fair treatment, more fair compensation, or at the very least, a safe workplace. I mean, these are just common sense, straightforward, humanitarian. These are not outlandish requirements or right. But again, that was the intention, the original intention of unions was to get a fair deal for employees. But as soon as you create an organization, a structure around that, and give it that intention, we're going to fight for workers' rights. We're going to fight for a safe workplace. We're going to fight for profit sharing. We're going to fight for the worker. And you make that the intention of the organization now. Now you've created a system that has an overarching mandate. And remember, a system is a machine. If you set up a machine and you say your job is to maximize what the workers can get out of the company, your intention was to help the employees. But the unintended consequences of that is you create this monstrosity called the unions. And many unions ended up bankrupting the companies. Or companies pulled up, that's why there is no auto industry in Detroit anymore. And all of Detroit imploded. Because with an intention, like getting the most from the companies for the employees, and the union is the middleman, the one negotiating this. You have union negotiators, union executives, the head honchos in the union. When you start an intention, oh, we want to get the most from the company for the people, this sets a tone, this sets a mandate, a mechanical mandate that says, I'm going to get everything I can from the company, which is a big machine anyway, and I'm going to give it to the people. So you have this Robin Hood mentality, rob from the rich and give to the poor. This triggers the self-righteousness, and also that says, well, we negotiated this deal. We deserve our cut. We're going to take our cut. And anytime you have that kind of middleman arrangement, well, of course, it's just primed for corruption. And you had the trade, you had the organized crime get involved in the trade unions in and around Detroit, the auto workers union, UAW, and all that stuff, and the organized crime saw it as institutionalized and legalized shakedowns of corporations. What organized crime had been doing for decades, but illegally under the table, cash, and quietly, and right where the Don would walk around the neighborhood, or his goons would walk around the neighborhood, and they would have to get their tribute, right? The businesses would have to pay tribute for so-called protection. It's exactly the same scheme that was being run in feudalism, right? The lord would go and build a castle and say, now, of course, if you want my protection, you got to pay taxes because it's not cheap to upkeep a castle. And all the lords would get together with each other and then decide, okay, well, who's attacking who and who's invading who next month? And they would go and they would invade and they would burn the village down. And the Lord would open up the gates and let the villagers come into the village and stay in his castle while they burned down the village. And the Lord said, see, they burned your village, but you're alive thanks to my protection, thanks to this castle, thanks to my knights, because all the nobility were knights. They're the ones who went and fought the wars, and so the expendable ones would go and would die, but the head honchos, right, the wealthy families, they would, none of their offspring would die, so they were able to run this grift, this scam, and the mafia did basically the same thing with small businesses. So if you want my protection, you got to pay. And they just had other so-called competing organized crime come in and wreak havoc and so on and so forth and create these so-called wars and everything else, again, to create the fear that people would pay these tributes. But all of this was happening illegally under the table. So along come unions with the intention of creating better workspaces for employees that were safer and more fair compensation for employees by negotiating settlements with the companies to get more money for those for the workers. The organized crime saw that as an extension. Again, listen to the words, because the words keep coming up. That intention, that good intention by some leaders in the workforce to set up a union, organized crime saw that as an extension, a legalized extension of what they were already doing illegally for decades. But now they could do it legally, but not to ma and pa shops, but multi-billion-dollar corporations, the auto industry. And so that intention, good intention to help workers, became an extension of organized crime, and organized crime exploited that good intention, and they destroyed the auto industry in Detroit, and Detroit fell into ruin, and all of the workers had to leave, had to go elsewhere, had to find other work. And this also decimated the steel industry, and it was like the fallout from the collapse of the U.S. automotive industry, and it was a perfect storm because the Japanese and the Koreans were coming in, and it was a perfect storm. But it was because of these unintended consequences of these so-called good intentions. Which are just intentions. You can't have an intention, good or bad, and not have unintended consequences. Because what you are trying to accomplish, whatever it is, it must balance out. It will have its antithesis. So whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, okay, whatever you're trying to create a tangible benefit, which let's just call profit, but it's a tangible benefit, there's going to be intangible costs. That's just how it goes. That's just a fact. This is mathematical, objective fact. You cannot get something for nothing. It's not possible. So all of this talk about efficiency and recycling and renewable energy and all of these good intentions are having untold consequences that nobody is keeping track of. But those unintended consequences, a lot of them, because they're intangible, means a lot of them are metaphysical. Like, for example, so if we talk about, hang on, let's make sure I got the right color here. So in other words, if we talk about physical, the intention is to the physical benefits, okay, are going to have metaphysical costs. This is on this plane of reality in this world. This is an absolute truth. This is an absolute objective truth. This is why intentions, I don't care what your intention is, it's going to lead to stress. It's going to cause tension. It's going to lead to stress and strain. It's going to cause others somewhere, some kind, to extend themselves and have to stretch to reach, to attain these benefits that you're trying to achieve that are going to have consequences, intangible costs and metaphysical costs. And so all of that suffering, those unintended consequences that flow out of those so-called good intentions, that they're all being paid by others. It was not your intention that others suffer, but they do because of the actions that you took, your careful, considered, planned actions according to your good intentions. So what's the answer? Like, this is all well and good, but if you're telling me, Attlas, that no matter what I do, no matter what I intend to do, it's going to be paving the road to hell, it's going to be creating problems, then what's the answer? Well, the answer is this word down here. Okay? Forget about all of this. Forget about all of this pointless, all of this. This is all, that's all just propaganda. That's all fear. That's all we want to work with impulse. But the key here is we want to work with, actually, you know what? I'm going to start a new slide. Let me just, if I can get this thing to behave. Okay, so let's just move this over here. And we want to start with impulse, but you go away, please? Oh, okay, we want to work with what we call the being impulse. You may have never heard this term before, but George Ivanovich Gurdjieff used it all the time in his writings. We can refer to it as intuition, gut feeling. Inspiration. In other words, that which comes to us and is meant to flow through us into the world. That which is born from the formless and flows through us into the into the world of formation. It comes into form through us. That which is formless, that emanates from our higher self, our true self, which is why intuition and gut feel and inspiration, these are subtle, right? These are very subtle, and they require trust. The better word here is they require faith. But true faith is trust, knowledge, knowing. The inner knowing, the knowing that comes to us, not from us because we figured it out, because we thought about it, because we were considered, and that we worked it out, and that we have an intention. So in other words, this process of information, remember, this is two words here, right? And my YouTube channel is Attlas Information. This can have no desired outcome, right? There is no intent. There's no intent in this process, in the process of information. And you might say, well, how is that possible? That means it's meaningless. It's pointless. So is it? You know, I often will say things that make me sound like a broken record. Intention, right? All of this in an attempt to not be pointless and purposeless and aimless and unintentional, right? We live our lives as a, you know, a human doing, because that's where intention comes from. We do it. We're a human doing. Oops. But down here with the being impulse, right? We are a human being done. If there is something that we can call an intention, it is to fulfill our duty, to do our work, to be, in other words, to be a human being done. A human doing is not being. Intention is not being. And if it is not being, it is the antithesis of being. It is not being. But what is the adversary of being? Our individual shaitan, the adversary, is our egos, our false self, which its very purpose, its very function is to make us fall and fall into hell. But our being, and when you for example, when you act on the will of your being and you truly let go and let God, and you have no identification or attachments, you're totally at peace. There's no stress, there's no strain. Even if what you are doing is difficult, even if what you're doing is challenging, and there's all kinds of obstacles and challenges, it doesn't matter. You face it with equanimity. You face it with peace. You're not stressed. You're not reaching. You're not stretching. You're not intentional. Because you have no intention. You're simply being. You're acting. You're fulfilling your duty. You're a human being done. You're acting on the being impulse, which is coming through you into form. It is in formation. And that's that word, what that word means, in, toward, or upon. It's moving toward formation. That's a birth. But where is the source? The source is coming from within. Your innermost intimate Christ, your individuated essence of God, the Creator. The Creator. the intelligentsia that is behind the entire universe. You, as a physical extension and creation and vessel, vehicle and servant of your innermost essence of the Creator, you are like the glove on the hand. And as the hand moves, so should we move. So should you move. And as you are guided from within, so shall your movements be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And that any difficulty or struggle or sacrifice that you make is for the sake of bringing into formation that being impulse. This is what you act upon as a human being done. And you don't have attachments to the outcomes. So there's no tension. There's nothing you're reaching for. There's nothing you're stretching for. There's nothing you're striving for. Instead, and you've heard this expression before, you switch from striving to arriving. If you fulfill your duty, given enough time, there will be consequences. And some of those consequences may appear good, and some of those consequences may appear bad. But if you have fulfilled your being impulse and you've allowed yourself to be a human being done, the consequences are not unintended unless there was an error, a mistake, or an accident that takes place, and that's where the law of accidents comes into play. So it is still possible to act on being impulse and having that result in unintended consequences. But the difference is that those consequences will be specific and they will be contained and they will be not your problem as such. They are the problem of your being, and it's hard to look, and there have been some errors in the past, the consequences of which we're still living with. So I don't want to downplay this in any way, shape, or form. But what that means is, if even our being can make mistakes and create unintended consequences, then how much less qualified are we mortals in setting intentions and instigating actions, and how much more dire can the unintended consequences of our actions. For instance, the creation of atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Even though people will rationalize it and tell you that it actually saved millions of lives by dropping those bombs and bringing an end to the war faster, the unintended consequences of that, if the metaphysical costs of dropping nuclear weapons, we affected every single planet in the solar system and beyond. We sent a shockwave that every single time we dropped an atomic bomb for testing, or the two that we dropped in Japan, we created huge disturbances on the metaphysical planes of reality, because energy doesn't exist in the third dimension. We wreaked havoc all over this entire sector of the cosmos. We have no knowledge of that. We're completely ignorant of that. This is what I mean by unintended consequences and metaphysical costs of what we do, because we have good intentions. We're going to kill a few 100,000 people in Japan, but we're going to save millions more because we're going to bring the war to an end. But what we brought about was the atomic age and countless atom bombs being dropped, nuclear weapons being dropped, and then we had the Cold War, and it's just like all this tension. I mean, I grew up in the Cold War, and the tension between East and West, right? Decades upon decades and billions of dollars spent on the military-industrial complex and missile silos and everything else, and all the distrust between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it just goes on and on and on and on, like a mushroom cloud. And the nuclear fallout of the nuclear age. And it's very easy for people to rationalize and fantasize and catastrophize an alternative reality, an alternative future, had we not dropped nuclear weapons in the Second World War. It's very easy for people to catastrophize and say, well, people would have developed them anyway, and they would have used them anyway, and this, that, and the other thing, and then this would have happened, and that would have happened if we didn't do this, we didn't do that. It's very easy for them to do that. But the reason why they're doing that is because they are desperate to cling to their identification and attachment to their false self, and their right to set intentions and to try to make the world a better place. You can't make the world a better place. Not that way. This is the hidden message in the Odyssey. This Odysseus's hubris. Odysseus says, I don't need the gods. I can do everything myself. What is he saying? I intend to go home. I intend to set things right. I intend to lead my soldiers. I intend to lead them home. And I don't need Poseidon. I don't need the favorable winds. I don't need the gods. That's intention. Because that intention immediately sets up tension between the false self, the mortal, who should be a servant and a vessel of his innermost being. It sets up tension between him and the innermost being, the true self. And that tension is what plays out between Polyphemus and Odysseus, Polyphemus being the Cyclops. Polyphemus is a child of the gods. He's a child of Poseidon. Polyphemus represents what Odysseus should be, a giant among men, a Nephilim, right? A child of the gods and a giant among men with his eye that is singular. That's from Matthew chapter 6, verse 22. But Odysseus is blinded by his pride. He intends to be the one in charge. He intends to lead his men back home. And he's blinded by his pride, and that blinds Polyphemus. That's it right there. That's the tension between the lower self following the impulse of pride and following the intention of, I am going to do it. The tension between that and humility and becoming childlike, a child of the gods, a child of your innermost. But that's how we become a giant among men. As the gods work through us, as we obey the commands, as we bring into formation, and we bring into the world of formation the ineffable, the subtle, the beautiful, the true, the universal, the eternal. And we bring it into the world, the formless, right? We bring it into the world of formation. We put it in formation. That's our role. That's our job. That's what the gods need us for. As I explained last week, because the absolute selflessness cannot know itself in a formless state, because it has no self to know and it has no other to give to. And selflessness is it's unrequited love in the absolute. So the absolute creates the universe and all of these individuated essences, these monads, and this world of form where the monads can come and take form as a self, who then has to choose between selfishness and selflessness. It's our true nature. And if we follow the intentions, our intentions, we create that tension, that pull between selfishness and selflessness. Or we can surrender to the being impulse and we can live in peace. It means being selfless, but who are the giants among men? The giants among men are those who sacrificed themselves, who gave of themselves, who didn't take anything from anyone, didn't ask anything from anyone. Sure, they received kindness and hospitality, and they accepted the kindness and hospitality of others. But they acted on their being impulse. They were humans being done. And that's why they were giants among men. Moses, David, Solomon, Jesus, St. Francis of Assisi, I mean, all the saints, all the martyrs, the list is long. But moment to moment, right, we are not qualified. We mortals are not qualified. We are, as Odysseus says in the Odyssey, not in Nolan's film. Nolan cut the line. But in the Odyssey, Odysseus says, as he's floating on a raft and all his men are dead, he failed. Right? The unintended consequences of his good intentions. Everything's collapsed and shattered and broken and lost. And he alone is there, like exhausted and left for dead on the ocean on a raft. And finally, before he passes out, he says, I finally understand. I finally give in. I finally understand man is nothing without the gods. And next thing you know, he's washed up on the shores of Ithaca. He's allowed to go home. He's allowed to fulfill it and set things right only once he comes to that realization, only after all of the hubris has been beaten out of him. And the idea that his intention to be the one that saves all of his men and to be the hero, his intention was to be the hero. And in the end, he became a beggar. And it was only by being a beggar that he was able to set things right, by hiding, by becoming that nobody that he told Polyphemus that he was. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, because intentions, and even good intentions, come from the false self. And that's what we're feeding, whether we like it or not, when we have those good intentions. I intend for this to happen. I intend for that to happen. I intend for this outcome or that outcome. You know what? When you're truly being done and you're following love, love has no attachment to outcomes. You don't give someone something, or you don't do something for someone because of an outcome. You do it because it's right. You do it because you're called to do so, because you have to do it. There's something inside of you that I need to do that. I just have to do this. You don't know. It's like think of those things that you've done in your life where there's been no rhyme or reason to it, or everybody around you says you're crazy. And it doesn't matter what people try to talk you out of. It doesn't matter. Deep down in your heart of hearts, I just have to do this thing. And I'm not doing it for any particular outcome. I'm not doing it to get wealthy. I'm not doing it to be successful. I'm not doing it for fame or fortune or anything else, like this YouTube channel, like the book that I wrote. Like a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past, unfortunately, and while we'll talk more about this maybe next week, because hope is just another kind of intention. But hope is we tack it on after the fact. Like, I knew I needed to write my book, and I did. And I knew I had to publish it, and I published it the only way I could, which is self-publish it. I did. But there's that little voice inside your head. There's that hope, that part of you that says, yeah, but maybe the reason why you had to write this book is so that you could finally sell it and sell copies and make some money and blah, blah, blah. And this, right? And so in other words, you have like retrospective intentions. Wataga says, our egos always seem to want to hijack the tasks our innermost has for us, take credit and self-aggrandize, or even have delusions of grandeur when dreaming about when we have completed the tasks, which keeps us focused on desired outcomes. Reminding ourselves as servants of God on a mission to serve can help us bring us back to the present reality. Yeah, so reminding ourselves as that we are servants of God's on a mission to serve can help us bring us back to the present reality. That's right. The only intention we should have is to attend to our innermost and attend to the needs of those around us. In other words, by paying attention. That's the only tension we should be engaged with, is paying attention to ourselves and to those around us. And in the moment. One eye in and one eye out. In other words, self-observation, self-awareness, what others call mindfulness. And we pay attention. Intention means to move toward tension. But to pay attention means to give that of ourselves at all times, to sacrifice, to give. Whether or not people receive it or not is irrelevant. You can pay attention to someone and not expect anything in return. This is why paying attention to people is so polite, and really listening to people is so polite. Because you're not expecting anything in return. You will get something in return because you're liable to learn something when you pay attention to people. But you're giving them your attention. So you're giving away your tension by paying that. Right? You're giving away any tension, and you're creating an avenue for peace and equanimity. And you're doing that freely as you pay attention to yourself, your higher self, and to the needs of others around you. This is what it means to be selfless. But as soon as you intend for something, you fall into tension. The tension between your false self, your ego, and your higher self. Because you're stretching your that separation. It's like stretching the connection between yourself and your higher self. Benjamin Raphael says, thank you so much for this exposition on how good intentions can pave the way to hell. I feel that even institutions like organized religion and politics may have good intentions, but since they are often hijacked by corrupt people, everything is going to hell, as we are seeing unfold before us. It also reminds me of scripture that says, test every spirit to see whether they are of God. If the intention is coming from the false self, then the spirit behind it is also false and not God. Yeah, God is love. It's, you know what? It's well said, Benjamin. And this can be very, you know, the Catholic Church has this intention to spread the word of God, but also to spread the teachings of the church and create Catholics all over the world, right? But sadly, that intention, because it is institutionalized, unfortunately, that institution has also often manifested in ways which created a great deal of tension, a great deal of unintended consequences. So that's really all I have to say about that. There's an opportunity there, but again, it'll happen if it happens. If it happens, it happens. I'm, after this week and meditating on this and arriving at everything that I've shared with you today. And I say arriving there because I was led here, right? I have been being led, as I often do, as I always do on these live streams. I'm led, right? I'm being done. I'm just following Attlas, right? That's why I have this name on the in the bottom corner and not my given name, because it's. But I had no intention of getting here, and yet I knew, because I was told, that I had to finally, like, explain, help people understand why we have this expression, this idiom: the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And sure, you can say, well, because everybody has seen good intentions go awry, and everybody's seen the best of intentions, fall into unintended consequences, and everybody has seen that and experienced that. But they don't take it far enough. They don't understand the metaphysical science of it that I've explained here today. That it is encoded into the base code of the language itself. Remember, in the beginning was the word, the creative verb, and words have power, words have meaning, and very often we don't have to travel very far at all to unpack the hidden meaning in words that reveal great hidden truths. Benjamin says, what you are doing is authentic because you are exposing what needs to be exposed without any hidden intentions. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It just has to be done. But the thing is that it's also something that I needed to be brought to this place. I needed to hear this, because if there is one thing that has been holding me back, it's because I have yet to completely free myself of intentions, and I have yet to completely dissolve my desire for certain outcomes. I've yet to completely detach from outcomes, and I have yet to completely disassociate and no longer identify with certain outcomes, and detach myself from certain outcomes. And this is key. This is critical. And the reason is several fold, but I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm just trying to think of a. Let's say that you're invited to a Benjamin says, having no intentions feels like a Zen state, a place of inner balance and equilibrium. It's a state of readiness. It's a state of being and a state of being done. So it's not passive. It's not passive, it's active. So, but it's, how did we describe it in theater? We called it a state of controlled relaxation. So you learn this in martial arts classes, where you take your stance and you're ready. You're ready to kick, to punch, to move, to block, but you're relaxed. You're you're loose, but you're not flopping around. You're loose, but you're firm. If that makes any sense. You're ready. You're planted. You're strong, but you're relaxed. So I wanted to mention. Imagine you were invited to a party, and you bring with you you mix up a cake or something and your intention is to bake it at the party. Now, many times when people host potlucks, oftentimes people will bring food, but it'll be completed, right? Someone will bring salads, or someone will bring this, someone will bring that, but they're already they're already prepared. But there's always somebody that brings something that still needs to be, it's only half done. It needs to be finished or baked or whatever, or barbecued or whatever the case may be, right? And so let's say you've prepared a batter, and you have every intention of baking this beautiful cake for the guests at the party. If you go to the hostess with that intention, the hostess may already have 3 or 4 people waiting on the oven, or she might be herself baking something in the oven, or she might already have planned everything out. And if you know that this cake is going to be spectacular and that everybody's going to love this cake, and you even bought like candles, maybe it's someone's birthday party, so you bought candles, you bought everything you need to decorate the cake, and you know it's not going to take much time in the oven or whatever, it's not going to be a big problem, right? You have really good intentions, but you can quickly see how your intentions can become an imposition. So I liken this to approaching somebody to ask them out on a date, right? If you feel that impulse, not out of lust or some other desire, but an impulse like, oh, you know what? You should go and say hi to that person. But if you go and say hi to that person with the intention of taking them out on a date, then you could poison the interaction because your intention is an obligation. The other individual may pick up your intention as an obligation. That's not saying that you can't ask them out on a date, but 9 times out of 10, if your intention is to take them out on a date, right? And even if it's your first date or your second date or your third date, the intention is always going to be there. And eventually the intention is going to take them home, is going to be to take them home and have sex with them. And if you've been in that situation before, you know that on the second or third or fourth or however many dates you've been on, and you're taking somebody out to dinner or dancing or coffee or whatever it is, but probably usually dinner or whatever, a movie and a dinner or whatever it is, and you have in the back of your mind the intention to make your move, you know how awkward and that sexual tension, and it's ratcheted up. The stress, the anxiety, the tension, the sweaty palms, the thing. It's like, oh my god, and then that other individual can feel it too. And people can say, oh yeah, but that's part of the courtship, that's part of the excitement, that's part of all this stuff. Yeah, but it's all just, it's not spontaneous. It's not natural. It's not relaxed. It's not, it's this contrivance. It's this planned thing. And that's why much of advertising, or much of these photo ops, they're dirty. They're it's just empty. There's nothing genuine there. Why? Because there's an intention behind it. These smiling politicians, shaking hands and kissing babies. It's disgusting. Because the intention there is for them to improve their public image. There's nothing genuine about it. The politician is not there because he's following the being impulse to go and be a man of the people and actually really listen to them and really understand their needs and their suffering, and to really try to figure out what he can do to ease their lot in life. No, he's using some golden shovel to break ground on a multi-billion-dollar project, and he's kissing babies and he's smiling for the cameras, and it's a photo op. It's fake. It's pretend. It's there to try to get people to pay attention. There's ulterior motives. Over here, we were talking about how it was used against us, and the propaganda was used against us. Well, like, you have to be intentional, because you don't want to go through life with being aimless and purposeless and pointless. Okay, so what did we get instead of that? Ulterior motives. That you always need a motive, right? A character in a story always needs a motive, always needs a reason to be doing what he's doing. And my only point is, if that reason, that purpose, that motive isn't coming from your higher self, your individuated essence of God, your individuated essence of selflessness within, then your motive is going to be an ulterior motive. It's going to be and an ulterior motive. It's going to be picked up by others as disingenuous, as self-serving, selfish, underhanded, right? And so that's the beauty about following the being impulse, is that you can be completely transparent, completely honest, completely open, and with zero obligation, no obligation, no need. You know what? I send you my love. I offer whatever it is that I'm being told in this moment to offer you from the formless world to bring into the world of formation. I offer you this, no obligation whatsoever, no ulterior motive. Take it or leave it. It's entirely up to you. And whatever you choose, God bless you. Like, it's truly without strings. Because that's another thing, that our intention, right? When you think about strings, like guitar strings or violin strings, their intention. But I'm not here to play the violin. I'm not here to do a song and dance. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm just, like I said, my purpose is to show. The show must go on. That's all. And the show will go on whether anybody's watching it or not. And it's with this newfound understanding and appreciation that I may be undertaking some new video projects moving forward. We'll see how it goes. But the point is that I have to allow myself to be led to what they need to be and how they need to be done. I have to allow myself to be done so that they can come into formation in the way that they can, instead of me imposing my way of doing things onto them because of an intention. That's the problem with, the previous book that I wrote and the previous videos that I've made, is that all the videos that I've made them with this intention behind them. And I think that comes across in the videos themselves, that there's some kind of ulterior motive there. And I am at this point where I have to reorient myself and attune myself to simply being done and fulfilling my duty and doing the work, and having zero attachment to the outcome, zero intention. As Mutaga said earlier, he said, our egos always seem to want to hijack the tasks our innermost has for us, take the credit, and self-aggrandize, or even have delusions of grandeur when dreaming about when we have completed the tasks, which keeps us focused on desired outcomes. Reminding ourselves as servants of God on a mission to serve can help us bring us back to the present reality. And that's really it. How to serve others without intention to change them, without intention to save them or convince them. It's just simply serve them. And to serve them what I have to serve. And to serve it, and in a way where like a waiter in a gathering, in a fancy gathering, the waiters that walk around with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, or a tray of canapes, and they're just, you just walking around with hors d'oeuvres or canapes, and you're just offering, and people can people will take them or leave them. But you don't sit there shoving it under their face saying, here, have a canapé, have an hors d'oeuvre. Right? Mutaga says, a few years back, I was very preoccupied about worldly responsibilities. I heard an inside voice ask me, why do you act like an orphan? Meaning you act like you have no divine father and mother. It kind of reminds me of this quote by the brother of Jesus, James chapter 1, verse 27. Pure and undefiled religion before the God, pure and undefiled religion before the God and Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their tribulation, to keep oneself unstained from the world. Mutaga says, basically, what you have done for most of us is visit us as orphans and widows in our hell and remind us that we have a divine mother and father. This is priceless, Atlas. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mutaga, and you're welcome. But that's really it. I mean, that's well said, right? And that's why from Odysseus, the Odyssey, that scene that Nolan completely butchered between Polyphemus, the Cyclops, and Odysseus is so important, because Polyphemus lives in the world, a giant among men with his third eye open, right, transmuting the sheep's milk into cheese, and he lives with his brothers and sisters on that island as giants among men, precisely because he's childlike, but he knows who his father is. It's Poseidon, it's the gods, it's his divine father. And Odysseus knows his divine mother, Athena, and it's Athena who puts him through all the tests and trials and ordeals for him to finally accept, right? But what you're describing here is really Odysseus's Odyssey is him becoming an orphan of the gods, orphaned by the gods because of his own hubris, his own pride, which blinds him, which blinds the Cyclops, which precipitates the Odyssey. But really, that's what, and that's, by the way, congruent with being lost in the desert and the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40 years, or Jesus wandering in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights when he's finally tempted by the devil, right? And so this is, and those are the temptations of Odysseus on his journey. The hero is always tempted until he finally realizes that the answer is to call upon the gods and the power of the gods. That's why in Greek mythology, the hero only succeeds by virtue of the gifts that are given to him by Athena. So Theseus and Perseus, Theseus kills the Minotaur and Perseus kills Medusa with the weapons that were provided to them by Athena. That's the only way the hero can endure, by accepting the aid from the gods, from his divine mother, and this is true even in Masters of the Universe, because Adam doesn't become He-Man until he harnesses the power that's embodied in the Sword of Power. Right? The power that's in Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, is the same archetype. But an orphan wandering alone, trying to do it themselves, and they have every intention, they have the best of intentions. And like Mutaga, like you said earlier, even our so-called elite think they have very good intentions. They're orphans. They're separated from the gods. They're always living in tension. They're living in constant stress of losing everything that they've accumulated, all their stuff, all their power, all their influence, all of their control. They're in that constant intention because they're so worried about outcomes. They're so desperate to control outcomes. It's all connected. What's really interesting, by the way, is that there is no positive antonym for the word intentions. The antonyms for intention are things like unintentional and aimless, purposeless, pointless, accident. Like there's no, and that's why we had to go through this exercise together of drawing this all out, fleshing it all out to get to the point where we could take one word, impulse, and connect it to being. Instead of intending, simply being. And if the antonym of intention is impulse, then being impulse. Being impulse. Attending. Attention. Pay attention. Not intention, but pay attention. And await the being impulse. And then you will know. You will no longer have to intend. You can simply be, and you will be being done. And all of the weight comes off of your shoulders. All of the stress and anxiety and everything vanishes because que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. I'm just here doing what I'm told. I say what I need to say. I show what I need to show. I do what I need to do. I bow. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And on our way. That's it. What else is there? Right? On that note, why don't we leave it there for today? Unless anyone has any more questions or comments. I think 2.5 hours on intention is quite in depth, I would say. That's actually 2 hours and 20 minutes. We're not quite at the 2.5 hour mark, but there's no reason to go for 3 hours unnecessarily, right? Just, it is what it is. Unless you guys still have questions or comments, and I take a moment to, if you want to say something or mention something or ask something, you're entirely free to do so. But otherwise, we'll wrap it up for today. But hopefully, there's a lightness. There's a lightness to all of this that I need to, a lightness inside that I have to allow to bubble up to the surface. And to not take so seriously, like in my previous past work, my videos and stuff, I won't say I agonized over them. That's not the right expression. I agonized over them, but I put so much time and care and attention into them and making them a certain way, and that really nobody cared. Right? It's just people just treat it all as content anyway. So is there a way I can approach it with more of that lightness, saying, hey, I'm here to show you this. Here, just consider this. Have you thought about this? Have you considered this before? No? Cool. Here, consider it. And I'll be honest with you. I'm feeling like just making shorts, 3 minutes, and not trying to, because that's the other thing that I did, that I would take on a topic, and I would, with this intention to comprehensively explain it in an ironclad, rock hard, or the perfect analogy that anybody can understand, and it's so systematically explained, piece by piece, part by part, so comprehensively, so it's like, why did I do that? Nobody cares. Nobody can get it. Nobody can grasp all of it unless their consciousness is awake and they're actually taking the time to do so. But nobody interfacing with a piece of content is actually paying any attention. So it's just so there's a balance there. There's something there, and it hasn't quite come to me yet. But I just have this feeling like, que sera, sera. It's got to be, it's quick and easy and light, but true and powerful, but powerful in its simplicity, right? The ultimate simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And if it is an analogy, if it is an allegory, then just let it be. Maybe just show it and say, boom, boom, boom. Here it is. Isn't that great? And move on. And not do all this labored explaining, because the intellect's never going to get it anyway. People are either going to get it or they don't. And for you guys, I spend the time, right? And together we can work it all out. We can flesh it all out comprehensively, right? But that takes hours. So there's no way I'm going to take this live stream and compress it into one of my infographic, videos of 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. There's no way I'm going to do it justice. But maybe, I don't know, maybe I can hit all the important points and do it justice in 3 minutes without all the crazy fancy explaining everything. Maybe I don't have to do it comprehensively. Maybe I just have to get to the point. And maybe it's just a really simple, maybe there's something in here that will jump out at me and say, this is the whole thing is this one piece right here. And maybe it's like when like somebody who's given the task to, I don't know, make a trailer for a movie, or more importantly, someone who's like given the task of making a movie poster or the cover of like the olden days movie posters, when movie posters were good, or like the cover of a book to illustrate that cover, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm open to it, and I'm awaiting and allowing for it to show up in this lightness and this kind of new approach, saying, hey, listen, I don't have an intention behind this. There's no intention here. It's just I need to be. That's it. And I need to be able to express that being in the simplest, easiest, quickest way that I can share it with people when they have a question. They say, "Oh, there's take a look at this." I can explain something here. 3 minutes. Take a look at this. Things like the Alm of Life, like because I have the Alm of Life explained, but it's buried in this 10-minute video. See, I don't need 10 minutes to explain the Alm of Life. What am I doing? It's like if I'm really here about self-evident experiential knowledge, and it really is self-evident, then like today, it should just be a matter of, hey guys, have you ever noticed that the word intention sounds a lot like intention? What's that about? And it's to the point where Benjamin was reflecting that back, right? Having no intentions feels like a Zen state, a place of inner balance and equilibrium. No intentions. So it's like, how can you have intentions and be at peace? Right? It's kind of simple. It's really, maybe I wasted everybody's 2.5 hours here today. Maybe I should have just done it in 3 minutes, and we could talk about something else for the rest of the 2.5 hours. I don't know. But you see where I'm getting at, and this is just allowing that the formless come into form, but just allowing the truth of it, and not being so formal about it. Things can, the formless is formless. It can come into the world of form, but it doesn't need to be. Everything I do doesn't have to be, every single thing doesn't have to be, Michelangelo's David. Right? It doesn't need to be La Sagrada Familia. Right? It's just something simple, right? Mutaga says the difference between intention and attention may seem not that significant, but the nuance is there. This may be the best way to remove the burden of focusing on desired outcomes and shifting focus. Yeah, I agree. The relationship between intention and attention and tension, but also pretension, because that's another thing. Let's face it. When you have an intention, especially to help somebody, especially to help them metaphysically, spiritually in some way, and you have an intention to help them, to change their mind, to change the way they think, to change the way they practice, that's very pretentious. That comes across very pretentious, doesn't it? That's a pretension. I'm going to spend some more time picking apart all these bits and pieces, because I think all of these words, when we break them apart into enough Lego pieces, right? They're just gonna fall into place, and some beautiful, powerful thing, some simple, beautiful, powerful expression is gonna fall out of it. They're all just gonna fall into place, and it's gonna be like, bingo, that's it right there. And then boom, 3 minutes, bang, 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 there it is in 3 minutes. That's why, intention is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Anyone have any other comments or questions or anything to add or take away? Or I'll give you a minute or two more to type if you want to type something. Oh, Mutaga says, basically, since we are servants, Focusing on desired outcomes brings unnecessary stress and tension. Yet when we pay attention, we are attentive and zen in a receptive mode. Yeah, so a servant attends to the needs of the ones he is serving, right? I've often said this. A servant awaits their lord and master to call upon them. This is what it means to be attentive, to attend to others, to attend to their needs. A doctor does his rounds, a nurse does her rounds, the physiotherapist in the hospital goes on their rounds and attends to the patients, attends to the needs of the patients. That's very different from walking around with intentions and an intention for the patients. If you're focused on your intentions for the patient, you're not attending to what that patient needs. And yes, to attend, to be attentive, to pay attention is to be receptive. And I think it's because what you are paying is the tension. Quite literally, you pay attention. To pay attention means you're giving away the tension. If you're giving away the tension, you're freeing yourself up. If you give away attention, all you have left is peace. I honestly think that's why the paying attention is that there's something powerful there. And attending to others, you pay attention to their needs. You're not focused on what you want, because that's what an intention is. It's what you want. It's a desire. It's a desired outcome. And as I've explained before, desire means to desire. Who are we desiring? We desire our innermost being, our innermost Lord and Master. So there's this beautiful interplay. There's this dance. There's this dynamic going on here. And I really do feel like I have to take some time and take all of these words and like put them out and just like, I don't know, like that game Mad Libs or whatever, like just move them around and see how they interrelate to each other, because I feel like there's something here that can be shown in a very simple, straightforward, and self-evident way that people can engage with and go, oh my God, and the light will come on, right? And that's really that's it, but without making that an intention, right? It's just a possibility. And not having and not doing it in such a way like I'm trying to force that light to come on. No, 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 no. Right? No, no. It's like you, here it is, and it's going to do what it's going to do. For 99% of for people, even if they do engage with it, nothing will happen. It'll just go right over their head, and that's fine. Right? It's just so it's playing with words and showing how the interplay with these words. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that cool? Wow, look at that. And that's it. and that that there may be the ideal format for this might actually exist, and it might, and I've been resisting it and fighting it, because I've frankly was probably afraid of it. But anyway, again, we'll see how it goes. Okay. Any more questions or comments before we call it a day? I actually hear thunder out there, so it's actually started to rain in my neck of the woods. If there's no more questions or comments, I do want to thank everybody who uh, took time from your Sunday, spending it here with us together this afternoon. And yeah, hopefully there's something from all of this that you can take away and make happen in your life, and apply to what you do, and just keep that lightness and that paying attention, paying one eye in and one eye out to the people around you, and your innermost being. And then as Mutaga said, position yourself as a servant. And that is your purpose for being. That is your purpose, is to serve, not to intend to do something or intend to make change, or to focus on outcomes or whatever, because that's a desire that you have. No. Focus on the needs of others, and focus on the needs of your innermost. And then if you do that, there's no desires for you to focus on. Benjamin says, thank you so much for today's live stream. You continue to unravel the roots and deeper meanings of words, helping to dispel some of the conditioning we have acquired over time. I truly appreciate it. Well, thank you, Benjamin. You're most welcome. You're most appreciated for being here as always. And I'm glad that I can be of service. What more can I say? Truly. But I want to thank all of you again for being here this afternoon. I want to wish you all a great week ahead. And hopefully I'll see you all again next Sunday. And until then, as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.